I'm Hal Ottaway with the Wichita Postcard Club, and we're here for a very special event today. So stay tuned. I want to introduce the speaker, and this is following the new movie production of that many of you have seen, of The Electrical Life of Louis Wain, and learning more about his personal and family history from the film. We are pleased to have Brian Lund from England join us today for this program that he calls the best CATMAN ever. Brian is a longtime collector and publisher and writer and teacher, and is very familiar with postcards and has handled quite a number of the Louis Wain cards through the years. And so we asked him to help us out today. And by the way, he's also a co-author of one of the checklists, or maybe the major checklist for Louis Wain postcards. And so we'll be showing a picture of the book, and you can of course order it from Brian, and his information and everything will also be in the chat window. So pay attention to that. But please give me a round of applause, and let's give a big welcome to Brian Lund.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody from Nottingham, England. Really nice to be with you to do this presentation on Louis Wain. Here he is then, Louis Wain, one of my definite favourite artists in postcards. I've called him the best CATMAN ever. Now, when the first biography of Louis Wain appeared by Rodney Dale, it was called The Man Who Drew Cats. This appeared in 1968, 29 years after Louis Wain's death. But it didn't really mention postcards very much, which is quite surprising because Louis Wain designed well over 800 picture postcards between 1902 and the 1930s. And you're going to see a selection of them this evening. I sure hope you like cats, because there are an awful lot of them coming up. I guess the world is divided between those who like cats and those who like dogs. So I'm hoping there's plenty of dog fans here this evening. Now then, here's the poster for the movie, The Electrical Life of Louis Wain. When I first heard about this a couple of years ago, that it was in production in England, I was really excited, because this is the first time that we've had a postcard legend actually featured in a movie. It stars a couple of very big names from England, Benedict Cumberbatch and Claire Foy. And so they didn't actually spare the expense of getting some big name actors in order to project this movie. We saw it last week for the first time in a proper cinema. We were the only ones in the auditorium. We had a private viewing. It wasn't an official private viewing, but there was nobody else there. And we came to the conclusion that not enough people really related to Louis Wain to go and want to see the film. And the day after we saw it, it was withdrawn from the cinema. We rang up to see if we could go again, and the man said, sorry, Louis Wain has left the building. And we tried other cinemas in Nottingham, but only one had been showing it, and it had gone from there as well. So it had a very, very short movie life in England. And we certainly wondered whether it had the wrong title. And obviously, The Best CATMAN Ever would have been a very good title, but The Man Who Drew Cats, I think, Rodney Dale's original book title, would have been absolutely great. I've always liked the postcards of Louis Wain. Back in the early 70s, when I guess I started collecting postcards, you could pick up Louis Wain postcards for about 40 pence in England. That's the equivalent of about 70 cents in the USA. But I didn't really home in on them then, unfortunately, because anybody who bought a stack of them at that time, at that price, would be doing very nicely now. But I did grow to like them. And another dealer from England called Christine Booth, whom I'd known for a long, long time, since the early 70s, in fact, first met her in a proper postcard shop in Barnstaple, North Devon, in the west of England, where her and her then husband were running the shop. It sold nothing else but postcards. It was absolutely marvelous, a real treasure trove. And she loved cat postcards, and she especially loved Louis Wain cat postcards. So she said to me, Brian, how about us doing a catalogue of the postcards? Now, one existed already. It had been published in 1986 by a couple of American ladies called Cindy DeLulio and Elsa Ross, and it was a brilliant book. But it had kind of out of date, and Christine had found many, many more postcards than those listed in the Ross DeLulio book. So we decided we'd put one together. She did the checklist and the prices, and I did the biographical information. Sadly, Christine has now passed away some 4 years ago, very sadly. Okay, here's the first of the Louis Wain postcards at the cat show. Louis Wain eventually became a judge at cat shows, and he designed a series of postcards to celebrate this fact with different prizes on. So we have first prize, second prize, third prize, and here consolation prize, and other different designs. There were a couple of sets published by Raphael Tuck. Now, Louis Wain was born in 1860. Louis is not an English name, but his mother was of French heritage, and so she gave him a really good French name, mirroring many of the kings of France. He was born in Clerkenwell in central London. His father was a textile manufacturer. His mother was a textile designer. Last time I came on to give a presentation here, it was on Nottingham and Robin Hood. So I could not resist tonight putting a postcard featuring Robin Hood. It's one of Wain's dressing dolls series, which you cut out and built into a figure. These are extremely rare because most cards, I think, that were bought were actually cut up and finished up as the real Robin Hood figure. There we are. He's got two different costumes that you can put on him. So these are tend to be very, very expensive. These model cutouts are very nice, but very rare. Now, Louis was as a child, was quite sickly, and he didn't go to school very often. He preferred to wander around and soak in the atmosphere around the streets. And so he developed a kind of strange view of the world. Here's one of the marvelous Louis Wain mascot cards. There are 24 of these altogether, and they're all very scarce and very highly priced. Some of them have sold for the equivalent of over $150 each. So there were mascots for various situations and various professions. Louis's education, as I said, was patchy. He often truanted. And his first career choice was really in music. He didn't really have very much success at this, although he claims to have written an opera. There is no evidence of this at all. Many of Louis Wain's postcards were set in spas, places where people could go to take the waters and make themselves better. Here in England, we've got a lot of spa towns whose mineral waters are said to have healing properties. These include Bath and Harrogate. One of Louis Wain's sets is based in Harrogate. The Kissingen wink refers to a spa town in Bavaria. Now, maybe it's good at this point to really have a close look at the faces that Louis Wain projects onto his dressed cats. They show the same emotions that a human being might do. Now, of course, cats can't do this. Cats can't actually smile or look, well, I guess they can look angry, but they can't smile. But Louis Wain decided that cats' most important features were their eyes. He used to say that the eyes spoke for the cat. And so he spent a lot of time, he concentrated on giving them really appropriate eyes, like the lady on the right, who's got surprised eyes, the lady in the middle who's winking, and the gentleman on the left who looks a little bit shocked. To have done this, I suppose, Louis must have been familiar with spas. He must have visited them and seen the arrangements for drinking and bathing and all the rest of it. After he failed to make a success of himself as a musician, he turned to art, and he studied at West London School of Art. If only this postcard could have told Louis what his fortune was going to be, he might not necessarily have liked it. When Louis was 20, his father died. Louis became the family breadwinner thereafter. He was already developing into quite a talented artist, not only a talented one, but a very quick one. He sketched ever so easily and ever so skillfully, and could turn out drawings in very short order. This postcard, by the way, is one of a set of fortune-telling cards published by Davidson Brothers, another London firm. Louis Wain had lots of different publishers, some of whom paid him, and some of whom just pinched the design or bought the design from another publisher. Louis was very careless in business matters and never really made himself the fortune that he deserved. As I said, he became the family breadwinner in 1880. He had 5 sisters that he had to look after, and this was the situation with them for the rest of his life. They didn't get married, they lived at home. They all lived together for much of the time. Although before this, Louis himself got married, of which more later. Now, around 1880, Louis was spotted by the boss of a very influential London magazine called the Illustrated London News. His name was Sir William Ingram, and he took to Louis. He liked the way that Louis designed his pictures. At this stage, Louis wasn't offering him cats, but Sir William sent Louis off to agricultural shows as a correspondent who would write reports and draw sketches for the Illustrated London News. The Wains were originally relatively prosperous, and the parents had employed a governess called Emily Richardson to look after the younger girls. Louis quite took a shine to her, and they became very fond of each other. And in 1884, Louis married Emily, although she was actually 10 years older than he was. So at the time he was 24 and she was 34. I'm not sure that Louis ever said this, but it kind of worked out that way. The marriage was very sad though, because very soon after the wedding, Emily was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she lived for only another 2.5 years, dying early in 1887. Louis was obviously bereft at the diagnosis and spent most of the time when he wasn't working looking after her and nursing her. Somewhere along the line, they acquired a cat, which they named Peter. And to amuse Emily, Louis drew sketches of Peter, numerous ones, hundreds and hundreds, developing his ability to do feline sketches. This is one of my very favorite Wain postcards. I love the detail in it. I like the situation. There's so much going on. There's so much here to look at. We've got here a typical high street. a cyclist cat, a cat driving a carriage with horses, elegant lady cats crossing the street with hats, and male cats, and one male cat with a top hat. It's a really lively scene, and it's one of the ones that I've kept. About 10 years ago, I bought a collection of some 600 Louis Wain cats, and I keep wishing really that I'd kept them all, but it wasn't really financially possible. But I've retained a few, and this is one of them. This one was published by C.W. Faulkner, another London firm. As well as drawing for the Illustrated London News, Louis was approached to illustrate books. The first one he did was in 1886 at the age of 26. It was called Madame Tabby's Establishment. Over the next 34 years, Louis was to illustrate many, many, many books. He did the illustrations. Other people wrote stories or verses which were appropriate. After Madame Tabby's Establishment came a 2-page spread called the Kittens Christmas Party for an issue of the Illustrated London News. It was 2 huge A3 size pages crammed full of about 200 cats, and it really helped establish Louis's reputation. In illustrating these Louis Wain cards, I'm not keeping to a chronological formula, I'm just slotting them in. This one dates from the First World War and is one of the famous Wain striped cats. See, the caption is, "We're all going to Berlin on the spree." And these are cats from the Allied armies, all marching with their guns. I've never ever seen, apart from Louis Wain's drawings, any striped cats like this. Louis did quite a lot of postcards in the First World War, but he wasn't working possibly as much as he might have done at this time. Anyway, back to his career ongoing, and the very first postcards he produced were in 1902. They were a set of theatrical personalities represented as cats. They were in black and white, and he designed them for Louis Wain. As his career progressed, the cats became more and more human, more and more usually dressed. I love the expression on this one. It's really, really symptomatic of Louis Wain's ability to convey emotion through cats, which is not, I guess, an easy skill. I mean, there are lots of other cat postcard illustrators, notably, I suppose, Arthur T.L. and Violet Roberts. But I think Louis Wain is definitely the best catman ever. I stick by my original title. The postcards became very popular. Other publishers came calling. But Louis was just selling all his pictures outright. He never kept any copyright. He never kept any reproduction fees. And so once the painting was sold, that was it. And what tended to happen was that the publishers themselves sold the paintings off to other publishers or magazines. And so eventually England was awash with Wain cartoons, and Wain wasn't making a lot of money himself out of them. After Emily died in 1887, the family of Louis, his mother, and 5 sisters all lived together in London. Louis just wasn't earning enough money to keep them. His mother was making a little bit of money from her textile designs, but she was becoming increasingly frail. The sisters weren't working and weren't earning money. Wain had a frank talk with his boss at the Illustrated London News, Sir William Ingram, and said that he just wasn't making enough money to live. Sir William offered him one of his properties by the seaside at a place called Westgate in Kent, which was very generous of him. And the family moved down there in 1895, staying there for quite a number of years, and I think having a really enjoyable time. In the next 10 years, Louis' book illustration work did gather speed, but he still didn't earn enough money from it. He was invited to join the National Cat Club as a judge, and he became a national celebrity in that particular world. Oh, I like this design. Seaside, burying Daddy in the sand. Louis Wain did not sign all his postcards, which is what sometimes throws collectors and makes a catalogue really essential to identify what is and what isn't a Louis Wain postcard. This particular one, the Cat Circus, has no signature on it. Not quite sure why, whether that was the publisher's idea, but it's very distinctively Wain, except that it's much more detailed than a lot of his cards. But I think it's very, very attractive. Louis didn't spend all his life in England. He had a period in New York between 1907 and 1910, where he went to work for an American magazine publisher. But he returned still pretty insolvent. He always had lots of ideas for making money, but none of them really materialized or worked. It's said that he'd sunk a lot of money into an oil lamp that somebody was claiming to invent and patent, but nothing, absolutely nothing came of this at all. He returned from New York because his mother died in 1910. Meanwhile, one of his sisters, the younger one, Marie, had been in a hospital for the mentally ill since 1901, a kind of presaging of what would eventually happen to Louis himself. One of his ideas was for ceramic ornamental cats, and he designed a whole series in a very futuristic way so that they looked like something out of the 1930s or 50s or 70s or whatever it was going to be. And a lot of these were manufactured, and Louis thought that he would make a lot of money out of these. He had a massive order from the United States, and they were shipped over, but on the way, because it was 1914, the boat was torpedoed by a German U-boat, and Louis' latest money-making venture went up in smoke. This particular card, Blind Man's Buff, a children's game that they play at parties. I love this one. Wain's style did transcend different countries, and this is obviously Japanese. The caption is Great Expectations, a nod to a Charles Dickens story, but he's fitted up these cats in beautiful Japanese style. It's obviously one of a series. Most of Wain's cards were published in sets of 6, as was the custom with postcard publishers. That was an easy number for them to roll off the press, and it seemed quite suitable for maximizing sales. Back at the spa, as I said, Louis must have visited spas in England in order to get a flavour of what went on at them, because his various spa series illustrated lots of situations. This is quite a nice idea, nice drawing. Meanwhile, as well as the postcards, he was still delivering illustrations for books, and later on in the show, I will put forward 4 or 5 book covers. Here again, we see the cats given human expressions, the gentleman being showered, kind of surprise, shock, and the lady nurse, or whatever we shall call her, looking suitably as though she's enjoying it. In 1914, Louis had an accident. He was traveling on a bus through central London. When he tried to get off, the bus swerved and he fell off. He was in hospital in a coma for a fortnight. and whether this affected his mental state in any way, I don't know. The bus is alleged, apocryphally, to have swerved in order to avoid hitting a cat, but I think that was probably invented afterwards. I'm not sure whether that's true at all. This card, Three Little Kittens, from the same series as The Blind Man's Buff that I showed 3 postcards ago. And the 3 little girls are exuding sadness. And the mum's looking suitably worried. But never mind, she's baked them a lovely pie. These are some of the details in the Wain cards that I really enjoy. Well, I keep thinking that I should adopt this particular card as a kind of trademark or something, because it kind of encapsulates what I've done for most of the time since I've been working. First of all, as a teacher, trying to think of lesson plans, and then as a magazine publisher, trying to think of what article to write next. So it's another one of my favorites. I have spent so long thinking about themes for postcard features in Picture Postcard Monthly and other magazines, and I still do, because I do a regular monthly column for a stamp magazine now called Philatelic Exporter. I do a near daily blog on Facebook, which I know some of you connect with, in conjunction with a good friend of mine from England, John Clayton, who's watching tonight. And these articles form the basis of the following year's Picture Postcard Annual. But I think what I'll do with this one is enlarge it and frame it on the office wall. Detail in this particular card is absolutely amazing after school hours. Quite a contrast really from the single cat cards that Louis often produced. And again, there's so much to look at in this one. It's really entertaining. 2 other events that followed. In 1915, his sister Caroline, his eldest sister, died of flu in a terrible flu epidemic that year. And 2 years later, the rest of the family, now comprising just Louis and his 3 sisters, moved back from Westgate to London. This is another unsigned card, by the way. The First World War ended in 1918, and Louis, by now 58 years old, began to worry about his responsibility as breadwinner for the family. He wasn't earning enough money still, and he felt he was letting them down. And he began to become suspicious of other people, a little bit delusional. It was at this time when he started expounding theories about electricity, which he believed was sending evil spirits into him and the rest of the family. And this was the basis of why the movie decided to call their film The Electrical Life of Louis Wain. I said that we'd seen it on the cinema, which was absolutely marvelous. I believe that most of you in the States have seen it on Amazon Prime. I know that we could do, but it was really, really exciting to see it on a huge screen. And I'm really glad we had the opportunity to do so and that we got in before its short run ended. This postcard features a game that was very popular in England in the first decade of the 20th century called Diabolo, which I'm sure you all know about, familiar with. It made a comeback actually about 5 years ago, but I don't think that comeback lasted very long. Next, please. So we've got to Louis' 60th year. His delusions become more and more worrying. His sisters begin to be really concerned about him. And after some time of this, they call the doctor and ask for some advice as to what to do. And the doctor recommends that Louis be certified as not of sound mind and be committed to a hospital for the mentally ill. This postcard, by the way, nice one, butterfly catching. And so it was that in June 1924, Louis was taken to a hospital in Tooting called Springfield, which was a very basic, cheap one with very few facilities. And I'm sure that he was very, very unhappy at this, and very, very unhappy at having to leave the family home. He wasn't there for very long. The following year, he got a visitor, an asylum visitor, who was there to make sure that the place was operating properly and that the patients were being looked after. His name was Dan Ryder, and he, because he was a bookseller, was very, very familiar with the work of Louis Wain, and he was absolutely astonished to find this gentleman in Springfield Hospital doing sketches, and realized they were like Louis Wain. And he said, "Are you Louis Wain?" "Yes, I am." And it was Louis Wain. And Dan Ryder decided that he had to do something about this to rescue Louis and to put him in a better situation. And so he organized an appeal, a national appeal, which was taken up by very many celebrities, including the Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald, which raised enough money for Louis to go to a much more upmarket hospital for the mentally ill at a place called Bethlehem in southeast London. Now, the Victorian name for this had been Bedlam, the word for chaos, but it was renamed Bethlehem, and it still exists. And in fact, at this moment in time, they have got on an exhibition of the work of Louis Wain, which lasts until April, in their museum section. He was at Bethlehem for 5 years, and in 1930 was moved to an even nicer place, a country house in Hertfordshire, north of London, called Knapsbury, where he spent the last 9 years of his life. It had a beautiful garden. It was a big mansion, and Louis was able to do lots of sketching out in the grounds. And in fact, he featured the hospital in some of his later postcards. This one is pre-war, however, one of his early cards. It's a pull-out. So you can see there's a kind of cut-out line in the middle of the picture. And if you pull up the flap, then you get views, 12 views of a place called Babbacombe. That is a seaside town in the south of England. And this card I've seen with lots and lots of different place names. So it was one of those designs that publishers could use to sell anywhere they wanted by printing a different name on it and make more use of the design. But this is another reason why Louis Wain didn't make as much money as he should have done, because having sold the original painting for this card, he didn't get paid anything else when they said lots of lovely views from Blackpool or lots of lovely views from Scarborough or indeed anywhere else. As I said, Louis spent the last 9 years of his life at Knapsbury in relative comfort until he died after having a stroke in 1939 at the age of 79. So with the next few cards, I'll just comment on the postcards before we come on to some of his later work. This one is one of a series about the Isle of Man, which is an island off the west coast of England. And it shows a cat family, various escapades. This one catching a boat for the Isle of Man. Now, the Isle of Man cats are known as Manx cats because that's the kind of word for the island. And Manx cats have no tails. And true to form, these Manx cats here have no tails. Here's Louis' cats at the theatre, having a lovely time, dressed up to the nines, with a gentleman holding court to 4 lady cats. Now, I like this card so much that we used it as the cover for our catalogue. It's one of a series by A.M. Davis, publisher, and they're all heads of cats, and I think these are absolutely beautiful. We've had 6 or 7 cats living at our house here in Nottingham, There was a cat here when we moved here in 1984. It refused to go with the owners, and so they said, well, you better keep him. When we arrived, his name was Boss Cat, but we renamed him, guess what? Louis. So Louis was our very first cat, and subsequently we adopted several more. But I just find the expression and the eyes on these heads of cats absolutely marvelous. This was one of the very first Louis Wain cats that cards that I remember acquiring. I'm not even sure how to explain it properly. I'm not sure what the £1,000 damage is referred to. And that's about $1,500, by the way. Whether the patient in bed has been injured by a third party in some way or by the doctor, I don't know, but I hope he's getting treated properly. But he looks in a bit of a bad way. This charming study of a cat's wedding is another of my favourites. I've tried to put in cards that I really like myself. I hope you like them as well. Now, all the cards that I'm showing tonight are cats, but Louis Wain did not restrict himself just to cats. He also drew designs which featured on postcards of dogs, of owls, of parrots, of other creatures. But I would say 95% of his work was feline. Yeah, a great wedding party here with the bride and the groom in the centre, and a couple of musical cats at the front. The one right at the front is marching very correctly with his walking stick. I think he's possibly an ex-army cat. Louis Wain was actually quite a sportsman himself, in that he liked sport, and he dabbled in various sports when he was young. But he did a marvelous series of designs in black and white featuring sporting activities of all kinds. This first one is obviously cycling. And again, lots of detail in this. This one found its way to France. In fact, Raphael Tuck did publish quite a lot of their cards in France. They had an office in Paris, and this one's been posted over there. And as the French did, the stamp has been stuck onto the front of the postcard. This was the French custom in the early 20th century. Whoops, we've had a crash at the side here. Two cats have come off. I'm not sure where the second cat's bicycle is, but there we go. Perhaps it's a spectator. Famously, spectators interfere with the Tour de France and knock riders off. And so maybe these are a couple of spectators who haven't got cycles, who've interfered with the race. Now, one of the sports that I've always really enjoyed is rugby. And so naturally, I've put together a collection of rugby postcards. As we do, if we like something, we look for postcards that feature it. And if we like too many things, then sadly, we have to buy too many postcards. So for those people who are not kind of familiar with rugby, and I know it's not all that popular in the States, the scrum is a kind of weird invention where 8 players from each side bind together and stick their heads up each other's backsides. And then the 2 groups of 8 come together and push hard. And it's something that if it already didn't exist, it would never be invented now. It would probably be banned. Anyway, here's Louis Wain's enjoyable take on a rugby match with a couple of injured cats at the front. That's the last of the pre-1920 issues of postcards from Louis Wain. Now, after that, he didn't produce anything new that was published on postcards at the time. But in the 1990s, an art gallery owner in London called Chris Beatles published 2 sets of postcards which drew on the designs that Louis had done while he was in various hospitals. And the next 7 cards show examples of these. This one's called The Gladstone Bag. Chris Beadle's also published a new biography of Louis Wain in 2011, which is a huge hardback book and drew very heavily on Rodney Dale's original research. So there wasn't a lot that was new in it, but it's a beautifully, beautifully illustrated book. This one's called Early Indian Irish. While he was at Knapsbury, the third hospital where he lived, his sisters continued to visit him. They were completely sympathetic to him and tried to care for him throughout his life, right up to the time he died. And Louis continued to paint and paint and paint, even decorating the walls of his room and the hospital walls with cat art. This one is Early Spaniel, and this is Mother and Child. Okay, if you've all got the violinist now, the title of this one is The Viol Din, which is a kind of parody on the word violin. Some of Louis Wain's later designs are a little bit fantastical. They're all much, much brighter than the work he did in the early part of his career. This is Norman. This is the postcard that I kind of identify as nearest to an electrical cat. It's a really, really strange design. Another way of interpreting it is to say that he was influenced by his mother, who, as I said previously, was a textile designer and kind of artist in her own right in that particular field. And this almost mirrors what might have appeared on curtains or rugs, but it's got the distinctive trademark Louis Wain cat eyes. As I said, Louis died in July 1939. He was buried at the Roman Catholic cemetery in West London called Kensal Green. At the end of the 20th century, his grave was very, very much dilapidated and overgrown, but another appeal was raised to improve it. Just shows how he continued to inspire people even well after he died. This last postcard is called Chinese, and again, it is surreal, fantastic, a rock and roll poster indeed. Now to finish, I just want to quickly show you 4 Louis Wain book covers. First, beginning with the Louis Wain Annual for 1913. He produced one of these every year from 1901 to 1921. And they're still, you can still buy them if you log on to internet book sites which sell books like ABE Books. They're still around somewhere, but not very easy to find. Louis Wain illustrated them, other people wrote the stories. This is Daddy Cat. Book publishers came to Louis Wain and said, will you illustrate this particular upcoming book that so-and-so has written? And here's Daddy Cat, a cat story. As I said, the museum at Bethlehem Hospital has a Louis Wain exhibition on at the moment, and Chris Beadle's gallery in London also has an exhibition of his original paintings. He puts one of these on every year, but this year, because of the movie, which he advised on, because of the movie, he's put on an extra event in January. He puts up lots of original Louis Wain paintings for sale, and they go generally for the region of £6,000 upwards. This last one, the book is called The Cat Scouts. There are at the moment about 10 of these available on ABE Books at prices ranging from £80, $120, to £1,400, $2,000. And I just thought I'd try and show you one of the inside pages, and the book is full of illustrations like this. A really, really wonderful publication. Okay, folks, I think I've rambled on for long enough. I hope you've enjoyed the Louis Wain presentation, and I will try and answer any questions that you've put forward. Thank you, Hal.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Brian and Mary, both. It's just fabulous, just spectacular in every way. Wondering, Ray, if you can unmute yourself, and Ray Hahn, see if we have any questions.
We do, Hal. I'll present them to Brian, perhaps two at a time, and in that way, maybe the lag will go away a little bit. Andrew asked if you still find new Louis Wain postcards, and Dolores wants to know what dates would you give to the publication of the most recent images?
Okay, the first question, yes, new cards do pop up, far less frequently than they used to do. So people are identifying ones that we haven't catalogued. We did actually, Christine and I actually published a supplement to the Louis Wain catalogue, which we published in Picture Postcard Annual 2009. But yes, new Louis Wain cards do still keep coming. The beautiful thing about postcards is that, unlike stamps and cigarette cards, not everything is catalogued. So any collector can potentially stumble upon something that nobody else has ever seen. I mean, we're all used to seeing, aren't we, cards at shows that we've come across for the first time. The second question, the Chris Beatles sets were published initially, the first one I think was the late 1990s, and the second one was about 2010.
Okay. George wants to know if there was any connection between Wain and Tesla.
Tesla.
The Italian scientist who invented the direct current electric.
Not as far as I know, no.
Okay. Jeanette wanted to know if there was any relationship between Wain and Mainzer.
Between Wain
and Mainzer, the Mainzer cats?
No, I don't think there's any evidence of that. No, I think they were independent.
Okay. And the first question.
I mean, Mainzer might have been influenced by Wain, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Kyle wanted to know if Louis Wain always used the same signature on all of his cards.
Yes, except for the ones obviously that he didn't sign, but otherwise they're pretty much the same. There's slight variations, and sometimes yeah, they're pretty similar most of the time.
Okay, so there are the answers, Hal.
That's good.
I will point out that you made an observation about that one poster kind of card looked like one of the 1960s rock and roll posters. It was so familiar.
Yeah, it really did. It reminded you of.
Yeah, there is. If Louis Wain had lived later, I'm sure he would have enjoyed doing an album cover for Meatloaf, who I was very sad to hear passed away.
Yes, just yesterday, I think. Yeah.
Indeed.
So that pretty much sums up the questions.
Good. Now, what about, we had two other cards. Mark Moss from California sent in a picture of this Louis Wain card showing a dog. And like like Brian had said, there were several other animals, but cats were the most frequently produced. But this is just an outstanding full-figured or chest above portrait dog, and again with the signature, and it's the gay bachelor with a hat, and has all sorts of personality, just like you would expect from something Wain. And I think he sent the back of it. It's showing that it is a tuck postcard.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In actual fact, this is quite a scarce card.
Is it?
And also, I like cards that have been postally used. I like cards. Yeah. I prefer cards that have gone through the post every time. And this one has found its way to South Africa.
Isn't that something?
Brian,
Before it was posted, yeah.
this is Mark Moss in Southern California. I am with you 100%. When I look for cards, I intentionally flip the backside. I do look for the message. I look for the stamp. I look for the postmark. And in fact, this one was postmarked in Natal province in 1905. This is before it became part of the South African, the Union of South Africa, which happened around 1910. And it's so neat, the penmanship, the stamp, the postmark all together, and the fact that it was a dog on the front, not a cat, made it, again, I thought very rare. And so I picked it up at a stamp show here in Southern California in September of last year. And I find it to be a very unusual example of Louis Wain's work all around as a result.
Good for you, Mark. That's just
Indeed,
terrific.
yeah. Great card.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And also, Ray, I think you found, yes, here, look at there. What can you tell us about this, Ray and Brian?
Well, I'll dissolve to Brian for all the authority that he has. I can just simply state that I got this card in a trade for some of my father's silver quarters some years ago. And I do believe that if you look at the Tux database, the number on the back of this card comes up as one of a set. And that is to say, the entire set consists of one card. So I'll let.
Right. It's a Raphael Tuck-Oilette card, series 8819. And yes, it is on its own as far as we know, but who knows, maybe somebody will discover a companion one next week, because you never know with these things.
Yeah.
But it was published in 1917.
Just spectacular and wonderful condition. So was Mark's of the dog. It just,
Do you know, we have a friend, a collector in Northern Ireland, who has been pestering me for about 10 years to find him this card.
really? Did
Is
you
that
find
right?
it?
And John Clayton will know who he is.
Very good. Okay, we have
So it
many-
is very scarce.
very
That's a
scarce.
very scarce one.
It is very, very scarce.
Okay, it's good to know.
Do we have any other comments or questions or anything? Anyone? We have a great group of people here today, and please unmute yourself and say anything you might like.
I'd just like to say thank you to Steve Zalf, who's just bought a copy of the catalogue online.
Brian, did he make any money on the books that he illustrated for people?
Yes, he did make money. He was paid for them all, but I guess he was not a good enough businessman to strike a good deal, and I think he was underpaid pretty seriously by the publishers, because publishers always take advantage of artists who are not businessmen. It's the same. It's been the same in the record industry and the art industry for ages.
Okay, I have one other question. The ones that he did towards the end when he was in the asylum, and you said they were, I forget, 1990 or something, that they were published?
That's when they were published. They were not published as postcards within his lifetime.
Okay. And are those available?
Because nobody, yes, they are actually.
Okay.
Just, yeah, if you email me, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Where are the original drawings for those?
The original drawings, some of them are in the museum at Bethlehem. Some of them are still at Knapsbury Hospital. I'm not totally sure how they came to be acquired by Chris Beatles for publication, but I presume he's loaned them from the hospital. But no Louis Wain postcards were published after about 1922. And I guess while he was in hospital, publishers didn't want to be associated with him.
Any other
Al?
questions? Yes.
It's Barb and Win in Toronto. Is it possible to look at the pull-out black cats? I think it was somewhere around 22, because I think just as the slide was moving on, I noticed that the tails spelled luck.
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
Yes, I'll tell Alan what number they are. It's number, yeah, you're right, it's number 22. Spot on. 22, Alan, if you're able to do that.
kind of a dream.
Brian, I met a woman at a knitting gathering recently, and she mentioned that she knew Louis Wain because her father was a gallery owner in London, and he was selling some prints during her young life.
Was that maybe Chris Beetle's daughter?
I
Or maybe
would have
another
to
gallery
ask.
owner?
I'll ask and get back to you.
Yeah.
Oh, I see this, yes.
Oh, look,
Good eye.
Barb, that's great. Luck, yes. I hadn't seen that, or I hadn't noticed it.
No.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alan. That's wonderful. And thank you, Barb, for pointing it out to us. Jeepers. Any other comments from anybody?
It was
Did
wonderful.
Brian, did you enjoy the film?
It
Can you
was
hear me?
marvelous. We loved it.
Yeah, it was
As I
quirky,
said,
wasn't it?
we wanted to see it again.
Yeah,
It
I
was
would have liked
great.
to have seen it a second time. And so, like you say, it disappeared, didn't it?
Where did you see it?
In Bath.
Okay.
Yeah, in Bath.
Yeah, it was. How many people were in the auditorium with you?
About 6 or 10 at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a
I don't think
I think, like
we
you
were
said,
pleased actually, because it's nice to go to the cinema.
well, yeah, it's the first time I've been for years. It was a shame, like you say, that it was portrayed this electricity thing, rather than the man who drew cats.
Mhm.
Well, I think, yeah, that's right. The man who drew cats would have interested in the curiosity of all cat lovers, I think.
Yeah.
And so you just got 50% of the population potentially going to see the movie.
And the electricity played quite an important part, didn't it? Now, I always associate that with the end of his life, you know, when he was doing all the mad, weird and, you know, funny cats sort of thing.
The writer of the screenplay chose to focus on that. And I think he gave it too much importance, frankly.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I agree. But at the end was great, wasn't it? When the credits came up, because we saw all these lovely, all these lovely postcards, all these lovely pictures. It was that was one of the best bits.
That's right. There weren't enough postcards in the film itself.
No, there weren't. No.
They wanted more postcards.
Oh, but you showed a lovely selection. Some of my favourites. That was good.
Great.
Okay, anybody else? Well, we just really, really thank you, Brian and Mary, for this time together this afternoon. This has been so special for us, and just such a sad note about the film only being shown one day. Thank goodness.
It was the week, actually.
Yeah, thank goodness we do have it on Amazon Prime, and maybe it'll be on a flash drive or something. I don't know. But, certainly important to us, to postcard collectors and people interested in history and so forth. Thank you, Ray Hahn, very, very much. Please look at his or their postcardhistory.net every week for new articles. And this will all be recorded and edited and so forth, and available in several days on YouTube. Be checking back and like it if you would, please. Our next meeting will be on February 5, same time, with Clarissa Ferraris talking about her COVID postcard collection. And thanks to Phil McDaniels for the Wichita Postcard Club news every week, and for not every week, but every month. And thank you all once again for coming, and cheers to our friends in England. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Bye, Al.
Bye-bye.